What if I told you that in 2026, you having the highest revenue and the largest team and the biggest shop that you've ever had and the epoxy floors and the perfect lighting is actually killing your profit? You've hired more staff. Revenue seems like it's trending up. You've been busier than you have ever been, and somehow you are making less money than when it was just you in the Bay. What the hell happened to my business? See, a lot of us think that the larger our shop is, the more staff we have equals more capacity. More capacity equals more revenue. More revenue equals more money in our pocket. But the truth is, more people and more revenue doesn't magically fix the problems that we already had in our business while we are scaling our vehicle wrap shop. It actually compounds and multiplies them. And I learned this the hard way. See, I walked into my mentor's shop one day and I was checking in on him. And I said, hey man, how's your hand? He had just injured himself and he wasn't racing and he was a little down about that. So I was just checking in on him. And he goes, my hand's great, how's business? And I remember bragging. I said, 2 record months back to back. He goes, great, what are you doing with all your cash? And what a great second question. It's just a man full of wisdom, because if I'm doing great, then I'm gonna tell him I'm either squandering or investing it. But if I'm doing bad, I'm gonna make up an excuse, right? So I ended up saying, well, I'm learning how to work on my business. Revenue's going really good, but I've got a lot of staff and expenses. He goes, well, great, what's your percentage of labor? And I was like, I don't know. And he basically asked me to sit down. He said, son, I'm not telling you that you are doing bad, but you cannot tell me that you are doing good. And your business is running you and you don't even realize it. Do you want to be a thermometer or a thermostat? Do you know the difference? And I was like, tell me. A thermometer tells the temperature. A thermostat controls the temperature. You are currently a thermometer in the business. The only thing that you can do is tell me the temperature in your business, but you're not controlling anything that is going on. Therefore, you are probably having a bad time. And he was right. At the time, we had about 12 people on staff, including myself, and we were missing more deadlines than it was when it was just 3 to 4 of us. I was personally working harder than ever, and the problem wasn't my team. The problem was not only the systems, but the fact that I could not identify the constraints and see the feedback loops that were occurring in my business. And that's what this video is going to be about. So let's hop into it. Now, I'm grateful that I had that conversation with my mentor. At the time, it was really deflating. I was doing a lot of boasting and showboating at the time. Revenue was higher than it had ever been in my business. And I was on personally like cloud 9, but all of it was actually cope. And I suffered in that for probably about a year. And once I decided to make a change, I ended up hiring a coach that was more of an integrator-based coach for systems and processes. And I hired this individual and we built a 6-month plan. And that was what was the start of my growth to get to the point of moving out and not working inside of my business anymore. And that's all it took, was a decision. In our businesses, there's a pivotal point. And by the way, this repeats over and over and over. Business never is infinitely hard. It depends on your goals and aspirations, right? But you can operate your business with intention. And once you actually decide to make a decision, think about making decisions a lot like you've got a plate of food, and it's not a buffet that you can just keep stacking food. Eventually, the plate's going to be full. So when I decided that I was going to grow and scale my wrap shop and make a real business out of it, there was something that I had to take off. Maybe it was the cheesecake. I had to take the cheesecake off the plate and put on a piece of meat instead, which was healthier for me, right? So a decision means to cut off, to remove. And I had to remove a lot of how I was operating my business.
Is your wrap shop in constant chaos? Endless reprints every day? Material being wasted? Your print room is always a bottleneck and your production just feels slow. Your installers have their own way of doing things because there's no standards. Where is that dang file? Good luck finding it. Your designer's the only one that knows where it's at. This is not how you run a business. This is a fire drill, and we're hosting a 2-day workshop to show you exactly how to fix it. It's called Printing Profit. We'll give you the systems for your print room, for your file organization, and for your people. So you can move a job cleanly from quote to install without having to babysit everything along the way. You'll walk away with plug-and-play templates, checklists, and KPIs that real 7-figure wrap shop businesses are using. We're capping this event at 20 people. So click the link, grab your seat, and let's turn that chaos into a profitable, scalable business.
So every growing business hits a moment where they're going to be constrained. This is an infinite cycle, and essentially your job is not to work harder, but identify currently, right now, what is constraining me from getting to my goals and what is constraining me from getting to the next point. And there are 4 key constraints that I've identified in the vehicle wrap industry. And the first one is finding customers. You can't do anything if you don't have customers, period. So don't get me wrong, revenue solves most of your problems when done intentionally. But this video is not going to be about revenue. We've made a couple videos in the past. I'll put a link here on sales and prospecting and marketing and building relationships, etc. But that is your first constraint. You don't have any other problems if you don't have people to serve. But once you start building up the reputation in your community, and you start getting leads in the door, and you start getting to a point where you meet your first ceiling, which is your where you need to hire somebody and get some help into the business, that's when you start getting introduced into these other constraints. At first, when you're growing your business, like, you will take any living pulse that's walking around with a credit card, and frankly, you only really need the credit card. You don't even need the pulse to swipe the card for a project, right? And as the lead flow gets easier, that's where your business starts to get a little dangerous. Steady customers start to kind of hide your real problems. So a lot of us start to think that, man, sales are great. My business must be healthy. I'm booked 2 months out. I hear this all the time. You're busier than you could ever imagine. And you're doing all the jobs, you're jammed up in production, you're working 60, 70 hours a week, your profit's disappearing. You are busy, but not successful. You are just telling me what you are. You're not controlling what you are. Again, thermostat, thermometer. And the reason typically is because of constraint number 2, your pricing and your labor costs. And when it's just you, you can price from the hip. You're going to be profitable. Like, you can really screw this up, and it would still be fine. Your overhead is literally zero. It's you. And frankly, most people don't even pay themselves a salary. This is probably one of the things that I was unaware about that I'm probably most grateful for. That Bill, my mentor, day one, put me on a salary. He asked me what I needed to live. And I told him like $15,000 or something ridiculous like that, because I did an honest assumption with absolutely zero fun and plugged into it. And I was living on $15K a year, and I had like a free rent almost with his crew chief. So $15K a year was my salary, but at least I was paying myself a salary year one in a brand new business. And so what that told me was a feedback loop that as I was pricing projects, I never actually just took money out of the business bank as I needed it. I only paid myself the salary. And what that allowed me to do was stack cash. So I only took what I needed to of the business to survive, and then I was growing the profits, if you will, or the profits were starting to accumulate to create like a piggy bank, if you will. Now, what's nice about that is we were always attributing an expense to the install. Now, obviously $15,000 is peanuts nowadays. This was 2013. It's still peanuts back then. But As we grew up as a business, I slowly raised my salary to $30,000, to $35,000, to $40,000. And I didn't pay myself just randomly, willy-nilly on the profitable distributions. I didn't say, oh, I need to go buy something, let me go get that. You're getting very poor feedback loops into your business and you're squandering your money away. And your business could be telling you like, hey, I actually needed that. And that usually shows up in the sense of like when you need to make an investment, it's like, I need to buy a printer, but I don't have any money. I need to hire anybody, but I'm scared to death to hire somebody because I don't have any money. Typically, it always comes back to a money problem, but it's not because you don't have money. It's because you are not pricing correctly. You don't understand what your gross profit margin is in many cases. And it took me a very long time to appreciate just how strong gross profit margin is and just how small little tweaks really add up to large sums of money. And when you're first starting off, you can do a commercial wrap or a color change for $3,000 or $3,500. It's going to give you money. But then you go and hire that person and there's literally no meat on the bone. And what effectively you are doing now is what little profit you did have is going 100% to that individual that you just hired. And there's nothing left for you. And so what do? We say, shit, that guy sucks. Like, I'm not making any money. Like, there's zero return on investment. No, you are pricing incorrectly in many cases. Like, he could suck or he could need more training, but in many cases, we just price too low. And so the first thing that you really need to do with this pricing constraint is identify, how did I arrive at this per square foot price? So many people in our industry are like, I charge $12 a square foot. I charge $14 a square foot. I charge $15. How and why did you arrive at that price? And if you can't tell me, then you must learn a gross profit margin calculator, period. And if you I'm just signaling, I'm literally sending you a smoke signal that you need to learn gross profit margin. I was always trained that at minimum, we should always seek a 60% gross profit margin. So first, let's define gross profit margin for anybody who doesn't know. Gross profit margin is the revenue minus the cost of goods sold divided by revenue. It'll end in a decimal point, so you can times 0.100, but in my mind, it's just point whatever percentage. And whenever I'm doing the math on a project, I'll put a little snippet here of what it is. We created a slider tool on the Wrap Quote Pro website. It's a free tool that you can use to quote wrap projects. In our industry, we must include labor as a component of our cost of goods sold. That's what COGS are. So to identify what our cost of goods sold is, it's our material price plus our labor. So this is your designer and your installer. It is impossible for us to do our work without a designer and an installer. Unless it's a retail wrap, then it's just installer. But you calculate these individuals or their cost effectively in a gross profit calculator. All right, great. So for this example, we're going to use a Dodge ProMaster 159 wheelbase with a high roof. And this vehicle printed has approximately 386 square feet, okay? So most people would just come and say, well, I charge $12 a square foot. So we're going to come over here and say 12 times 386.9. Okay, that's $4,642. Now, on this example, if I was to raise this up to $4,642, I am roughly a 70% gross profit margin. Now, here is where the problem lies. That is assuming we are completing this unit in 16 install hours from start to finish. That includes your prep, that includes your breakdown, and includes your reassembly, okay? This is where it gets squirrely for most people on their pricing. So the pricing might not be the problem, but now we know why we arrived there. We're at a 70% gross profit margin at $12 a square foot based on these inputs. Now, let's say we changed nothing and we just got more effective and the installer installed in 12 business hours, then actually we have a gross profit margin of 73%. Okay? And the difference, by the way, is that our profit was at $3,400 basically, $3,380 versus $3,200. So that's $200 per unit differential, okay? And let's just say that based on that math that you are installing 120 units because there's 220 business days in a year. So we're going to divide that in half. That means you have 110 units, right? And that's not working weekends and nights. This is just an 8-hour workday, which we know none of you guys do. I didn't. And that is times 4,600. So times, $200 difference. 200. It's an extra $22,000. That 3% differential, just because we got more efficient, created $22,000 more in your business. And we are over here complaining about not being able to afford a new next installer / designer, whatever. The problem isn't that we can't afford it. The problem is that we don't spend enough time to go look at these little micro tweaks that we can do in our business to afford it. Now, that brings us to our next component, which is that in many cases, based on this math, it's good, but the math is flawed. Many people think that they install in 2 business days, and they don't. They install in 3. And that effectively breaks down this thing. So let's go from 16 man hours to 24, okay? And then let's just say that the design fee actually wasn't as clean as it could have been, and it was actually $350 in cost for that design. Now we're looking at, if we kept our profit margin at exactly the same point, 70% gross profit margin, we now have to charge that customer $5,901. Okay? Well, we can't always just raise the price on the client, right? So now I have to slide my slider down to, okay, so I put it back to $4,600 or $12 a square foot, basically. But now our actual gross profit margin is 62%. Okay? Now, this is because we finally identified that maybe it's not my pricing. Maybe I'm constrained by the standards of the output of the team against my pricing. So I can use my pricing to identify a feedback loop. So it's like, based on what I think that I'm doing, I should be making money. But if I'm not, then I can go investigate. Why am I not making money? Because the math is sound, right? So let's do that math again. Our profit margin now, or our profit rather, is $2,888. So we went from $3,200 profit down to, and that was on the first example without, being even more efficient. So we went from $3,200 plus or minus down to $2,888. So let's do the math on that. So we have $3,200 minus $2,888 equals $312, right? Times 110 units is $34,000. So again, this is why you can't afford the help that you need. This is also why you aren't profitable. Is because we are not identifying the standards against our constraint. So now we have leads coming in the door. We identified that. We got that mostly solved. Now we're assuming that based on how we used to price and we have more overhead, that as we start to bring more people in, that our pricing before still works. No, we broke the model, or it was already broken. It just never reared its head. We never got the feedback loop. And so the difference between an installer getting a job done in 2 business days versus 3 business days, start to finish, is 40 units a year. So let's just look at top line revenue. The difference between your capacity on 40 units, let's just say it was $4,600, and it's $184,000 in top line revenue. So I know that's a lot to take in. Go back and review this video a couple of times. Also view my video on how to use the Wrap Quote Pro tool. I am very slow and deliberate on that video on how to quote and break down some scenarios, but it's a free tool. I built it because I feel like more people need to understand why they are arriving at their per square foot price. Now, the third constraint in a vehicle wrap shop is overexpansion. And what do I mean by that? So a lot of us get caught up in looking at Instagram and seeing the lights at these shops and the epoxy floors and the wrapped walls. And like, these are all massively, massively, massively important. But I want to tell you that a big shop, like so many people, you'll see it sometimes on the forums where it will say, looking to hire. And then I'll see an installer say, how big is your shop? What does that matter? It literally doesn't matter how big a shop is. How effective is your shop? Do you have deals coming in the door? Because you could have a really big open space with no cars in it. Or you can have a really big open space with no rotation of cars because you guys are slow at putting them out. So I personally learned this lesson multiple times. I remember moving into my 2,400 square foot shop, and I remember saying, hey, Bill, I want to epoxy the floors. He's like, why? I was like, because it looks good. He goes, but that doesn't make you money. And he was right. And I also believe that epoxy floors is important, but there's a time and place for it. Make sure that we've identified that our pricing is good and that we're setting money aside for it over time. And we basically, we ended up epoxying that floor, and then I grew too fast and I moved to a 5,000 square foot shop shortly after. So now I've wasted the money on the epoxy floor and only got like a year and a half out of it. So it was a waste of money in that case, and he wasn't wrong. And then I also moved into, this is the lesson about overexpansion, I moved into a 5,500 square foot shop. And for the first year, I was playing catch up, trying to fill that shop. And it bled me. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that extra $2,000, $2,500 a month reduced my profitability massively for about a year. And you need to be planning for that. Big shop is great, but more parking space is better, in my opinion. And that's coming from somebody with, my shop currently is like 8,800, 9,000 square feet at one of our shops. My other shop's only 2,000, 2,400 square foot, and it's just an install bay, but it is as small as it needs to be. Like, it does not have to be a large shop. You can fit 3 or 4 units in there, and odds are you're not doing 3 or 4 units every single day. So parking matters more than the square footage in your shop. And then I would say the next thing would be like a 14-foot bay door. Some of us start thinking, like, I have conversations, and a lot of people are in the same mindset that I was. We get to about $1 million, and then I'm going to open up another location. It is massively difficult to run 2 locations, let me tell you. And then you have even more liability exposure. I would make sure to identify all of your other constraints and make sure that you are running at like a 30+% net profit before you ever open another shop. Maximize your current business, dial it in, and extract as much as you can from it first. Do not make your business more complicated than it needs to be, because that almost wiped me out. We had a moment where I had to terminate the person that was the head person running that location, and we had like 4 or 5 months that we had nobody over there. And that was, that particular lease is like $8,000 a month because it was storefront. And this was back when we were doing PPF and Tint. So make sure all of your P's and Q's are together, and you better have a nice nest egg to the side. Now, I was basically managing at one point 3 locations, and all 3 were doing okay. But once we went back and consolidated down to 2 is whenever I went from mediocre to great. It's a distraction, frankly, for most people. I would dare to say that I would try to shoot for like 3 million plus with a 20 to 30% net profit period before you ever look at expanding to a second location. Unless it's just a crazy deal, crazy lease, friend of a family, and your liability exposure, and the lease is great, you can get out of it, and yeah, it's very complex. But don't overexpand, don't over lever yourself. Overexpansion also includes debt. Like, be careful how much you're putting into the shop. Don't go in debt just to get the lights and the floors. Like, grow into it. Be patient. Don't compare yourself to these other shops. Your customer is not buying from you because you have pretty lights. They're buying from you. They're buying from you. My customers never cared that my floors were epoxy. I cared. That was my ego. Now, there are some people like, oh, this is nice. But, oh, this is nice, or, oh, I know I'm going to get what this person's promising me, which really matters. I could be a dipshit with the nicest shop and still not make the sale. So the customer cares more about you and how you run your business than they care about some of the aesthetics. And the aesthetics play in on the back half of everything. So when you're first starting off your business, just ask yourself, will this make me more profitable? Or does this make me feel more important? So the final constraint that I want to cover is focus. And I feel like this is what separates the monsters from everybody else. Let me explain. Focus over time is just a massive superpower. Most wrap shops offer every service under the sun. You go to their website and you look at their branding message and it's like, geez, these guys do everything. And that's great. You could be in a small demographic. There are exceptions for the rule. And that's why I did it as well. But over time, as you start to eat up market share, you need to dial in. What is my main offer? What is it that we, like, you, when you ask me, like, why should I use you? It's like, because we are the resource for this particular product. Not because I'm good. Like, dude, or I'm the best wrap shop. I use the best materials. It's 2026. Everybody's the best shop. Everybody has great materials. Like, frankly, even the shittiest materials are better than the materials 10 years ago. So, like, it's not an argument. The customer doesn't care. What are they receiving? Why should they use you? What makes you different aside from your ego? And I sold like that forever. And it wasn't until that we started focusing on the customer's problems and dialing in just one service that, like, the business exploded. And it's so weird to say that, just like at the beginning of this video, I said, like, my plate was full and we had to take something off the plate in order to put a better portion on the plate. I upgraded from, a McDonald's hamburger to a filet mignon, basically. And that was basically eliminating all of our PPF, tint type services. We were not a retail-based business. We didn't like doing it, frankly. It overcomplicates staffing. Think about it. It's already hard enough hiring somebody, and now you have. I had a signage person, I had a PPF person, I had a window tinter, and, like, yes, some of those skills cross over, but when they cross over, that also makes that person more valuable, right? But it also makes them more of a liability as well, as, like, if they were to leave, because now you got to go find this unicorn again, because very few people in most markets are available that understand all those skills. You have to grow that person from the ground up. And the other constraint for if you don't focus is your marketing. Marketing is already hard enough. Like, getting the word out about your business and getting people to see your business, back to the first constraint of getting leads, you're basically running, okay, I have a channel of PPF, I have a channel of tint, I have a channel of ceramic coating, and then it's like, oh, by the way, I also do this like commercial thing over here, and I also can do your signs. And it's like, you think that the customer wants that all-in-one shop, and some of them do, but in many cases, most of your retail customers have nothing to do over here. There's like a 10%, 15% crossover. But otherwise, you're basically like, instead of $5,000 in ad spend or $5,000 in total marketing effort towards one lane, you're like $1,000 here, $1,000 there, $1,000 here, $1,000 there, and it's like no wonder nobody knows you. It really waters down your message. So once you get past the phase where you're steady, and if you're really, really busy right now, I highly recommend looking at your profit and loss ledger. And I've had to make this decision multiple times in my business where I saw that we were doing, talked about it many times, $400,000 in signs, $500,000 signs, something like that. But I was like, I hate signs. I hate permitting. I hate dealing with governmental process. What can I do? And so we replaced the signage revenue with window tint, PPF, and ceramic coating. So at least it was a step, right? It wasn't just like lopped it off and then like revenue's dead. Don't do that. Don't kill your business. But it was an over time thing. So it was like over the next 2 years, we basically phased out all of permitted signs. We immediately phased out permitted signs, and then we kept the aluminum, max metal, stuff like that, and but kept doing more and more cars. That was the focus at first. It was like, I just want to do cars in my shop was the first focus. Great, we got revenue back up to like 1.3, 1.5, something like that, and that's when the last like 2-3 years started happening, and we were like, man, we're really tired of this like revolving door. Where the phones, like window tint, especially if you do tint, you know what I'm talking about. The phones, they're off the hook. Like, I think a window tint lead on ads is like $3 in Florida during the summer. Like, you can't answer clients fast enough, and the clients are not very loyal at all. It's literally like, what's your price? $350. F you. like it is not a great sales process. There's no relationship, and either they like you, they like your price, and you can do it today. So if you can't do it today in Florida, you're not getting the job in many cases, unless it's a loyal customer. But most people want it done now. They want it done fast, and some of them want it done cheap. And so the phones are just off the hook. But at the price per lead, you can manage that. But administratively, it's tiring. And so in the last 3 years, we decided, hey, we want to focus. So we talked to the team. They all decided we wanted to do this all commercial wraps. And then that's where, I got introduced to going even deeper into commercial. And that single decision was the best thing we've ever done. And we started finally getting and attracting those clients that we wanted. They never looked at us before because when they went to our website, our messaging was like, hey, we do it all. And we're like, we don't want that guy. We want the guy who only does me. I only want to do my wraps on my commercial vehicles so that I can get it back as quickly as possible. So I highly recommend that if you're looking to grow really big, or if you're really looking to get simplified and you want to buy a lot of your time back, look at your product offer. And it doesn't have to be cut all of it. Are you doing a particular service because you think that you need it, but you really don't love it? Either raise your price really high on it so you're getting paid for it, and you reduce the amount that you do, or you don't do it at all. Now that we've identified the 4 constraints, what can we do immediately? Like, oh my gosh, I have all these things to do in my business. That is your brain trying to keep you safe and procrastinate. It's very simple. The very first thing that you can do is raise your prices. And not by much, by the way. I've already showed you an example of a 3% gross profit tick increased the bottom line net, or increased a 3% increase of gross profit generated the business an additional $22,000. So that means that if your business is making zero net profit right now, and you just bumped up your price by 200 bucks, and you had the leads filled in to where you had work coming in already, then you just generated on just that one product for one installer. That's only one installer, by the way. So if you have multiple installers, this compounds. One installer, you just increased your profitability by $22,000 across the year at 110 units for the year. So raise your prices. Now, some of you might be scared to raise your prices. Listen, a lot of people think if I raise my prices, my customers won't buy from me. Raising your prices by 200 bucks is not going to scare away a customer. Being $800 or $900 differential is. So this is a small incremental thing that you're going to do across the board. You can also do things like charge credit card fees. If you're not already, I haven't. I'm going to this year because we're at the point that that's almost a six-figure salary. Like I have to, because I can hire a killer to serve my customers. And I can also sway my bigger accounts to go ACH. So the first thing you can do is raise your prices. And let's just create a scenario here. You're at $1 million in revenue and you're making no profit. Okay? Or let's just say you're making 10% net profit at the end of the day. And let's hope that you're paying yourself a salary at that 10% net profit, because if not, you're actually making zero. Okay? But you're paying yourself a small salary, a fair and reasonable salary. Let's just call it $40K to $60K. And then you're taking home on $1 million, $100,000. If you raise your prices by 10%, then the worst that can happen is you lose 10% of your customers. So now you only do $90,000 of net income because you only did $900,000 in sales. But the upside is if they stay on this example, then you did $110,000 in revenue, but you made $200,000 in net profit. Like, let that sink in. You literally doubled the bottom line of your business because you raised your prices by 10 gross profit margin points. Gross profit margin is massively underrated and massively needs to be adjusted and looked at often, because your suppliers are increasing their prices incrementally. And that is affecting your bottom line more than you realize. It's chipping away at your profits. So you need to recalibrate your business's gross profit probably every quarter or every 6 months minimum, to ensure that somebody didn't inflate a price and that you are on where your metrics need to be. You can also get more effective and efficient. You don't always just have to increase your prices 10%. You can also increase them 5% and get 5% more efficient. This is where it gets tricky, or it actually gets really cool, because you can do both. You can increase 10% and get 5% more efficient, and then you're really doing good. But you don't have to just immediately yank the cord and raise the prices 10%. If your installers are getting jobs done in 3 business days, we've already identified that's a differential of 40 units for a year based on a standard of 2 days. Then the first thing you need to do is raise your prices 5%, but also set a standard and set a tone in the business that you're going to get these units done in 2 business days, period. That is the standard that we must meet. It's not. It's actually a very fair standard. So, I hope that you take this seriously. I hope that this saves you a lot of grief. I give these lessons because I've gone through them. I personally am going through this gross profit margin thing myself because I overexpanded my business. I grew too fast and I put my eyes on all this growth and I wasn't taking care of the fundamentals for a little period of time. And it's back on track, but it just reinvigorated me on how important it is to look at these 1 and 2 and 3% things. The last thing I'll leave with you, if you are not profitable right now, go to your expense report. I just found $5,000. I hate to admit this. I found $5,000 in expenses per month on my wrap shop that was wasted subscriptions and or things that shouldn't have been on there that were coming out, and I just increased my net profit by an additional $60,000 this year. So spend the time, stop working so hard. Take a moment, look at your numbers, identify what is the problem, what is the constraint. That is the key here. What is constraining my business right now? And solve it. Get it done, and then move to the next thing. And by the way, you'll never not be constrained. There is always something to solve. So with that, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.